getting out and about with your family. 5 local historical hotspots to see this summer. Experience our pioneer heritage firsthand.
How do you feel when you walk across the finish line? What does it mean?
Yeah! Going the extra mile for a neighbor, a friendship that inspires racers statewide. And a Japanese family lost everything at an internment camp during World War II. How this hardship helped spark an interest in the gospel, and why a half-century later they returned for an annual arts camp in Gunnison. Good morning. We hope you enjoyed all of your Pioneer Day celebrations last week, and you can extend those celebrations throughout the summer by visiting some of the local church history sites. Emily Utt from the Church History Department is here to tell us about 5 lesser-known places in and around Salt Lake worth checking out. Good morning, Emily.
Good morning.
So tell me how you came up with the criteria of these 5 places we're going to talk about today.
Well, I selected sites that are not official church history sites, that people may know about them, but they probably don't. And so when I was asked to do this, I basically walked around the office and talked to all of my colleagues and said, what is your favorite little hidden spot in the church in Utah you can get to?
And these are what you found?
These are what I found, and some of these I've been to and some of these I haven't, and these are the ones that stick out to me as places that I like, that have a little bit more of a story to them.
Yeah, they're definitely unique. Let's start with number 1 in Yosepa.
Yes.
What's there?
Yosepa is in Skull Valley, which means you're going to be going out past Grantsville, then taking Highway 196 for about 15 miles out into the middle of the desert. And this was a settlement founded in about 1890 by a group of Hawaiians that came to Utah to be close to the temple and close to church headquarters. And you may think, well, what are a bunch of Hawaiians going to do in Skull Valley? And they had pretty much the same question. They found life out there very, very difficult. And by 1916, their settlement was gone. And so all that's left now is a cemetery, remembering those that died there, as well as if you look really closely, you can see some of the city, you can see a few fire hydrants and just a few little features of that place.
But there's some place there that will give the story and tell the history?
Yeah, there's a couple of historic markers and then the cemetery that's left of this little town. And there's been archaeological work out there recently trying to understand these people. And if you go back into the hills, there's apparently petroglyphs that they left of sea turtles and other Hawaiian creatures that you wouldn't normally see in Skull Valley, but there they were.
Very interesting. Number 2, you and I talked about this a little bit earlier, the first encampment park. I'd never heard that this was there. Tell us about that one.
The first group of pioneers who entered Salt Lake on the 22nd of July, 1847, camped at about 1700 South and 500 East. And there's now a little park there commemorating that very first night of very first settlement in Salt Lake City. And there's
How big is that? I mean, what's there?
It's just a small city park. There's a few historic markers and then a boulder field with all the names of those who camped in the park on that night. And then from there, they went in closer to what's now downtown Salt Lake.
And I know there's something really close to that.
Yes. About a block north of the first encampment park is Wilford Woodruff's original farm homestead. And the house still stands. It's an 1860s log structure that Wilford Woodruff himself built, which makes it one of the oldest buildings in Salt Lake. And it's open sometimes for tours. So if you plan ahead, you might be able to get in and see Wilford Woodruff's original house as he built it.
That would be fascinating. I would love to see that. Yeah. Now, the 10th Ward Complex in Salt Lake City. Tell us what that is.
I find this one really interesting because I love historic architecture. The 10th Ward Complex is a series of 2 meeting houses and a school. The original 10th Ward School, which was on the corner of 900 East and 400 South, was built in the 1860s. It's the only surviving meeting house in Salt Lake from that earliest period. And then in about 1910, the 10th Ward built a new meeting house. In the 1880s, they built a school. And now all those 3 separate buildings are one meeting house for the 10th Ward. And you can visit it, attend church services in that building, and have a piece of the earliest pioneer history in Salt Lake. And
can you go through there during the week, or is it strictly just for the ward members there?
It depends on if the building's open for another purpose. You might be able to get in during the week, but odds are you can see it on a Sunday afternoon.
Okay. Now, Warm Springs, tell us about that.
Warm Springs is at about 300 west and 900 north in Salt Lake City. I consider this one of the very first theme parks almost in Salt Lake. The first pioneers went there on the 26th of July, 1847 to take a bath. They were probably a little tired from the journey. And for the next almost 100 years, that was the place to go to swim, to bathe, to relax in Salt Lake. That was also one of the first public transportations in Salt Lake was to go up to the Warm Springs. Okay. And there's now a park there and historic markers explaining why there's a Warm Springs in that spot.
Okay. And finally, David O. McKay home in Huntsville.
Yes.
Is this his original home here?
This is the David O. McKay home in Huntsville is the home where he was born and raised. And what makes this so interesting is David O. McKay is one of our best loved Mormon figures of the 20th century.
Yes.
For certain people, you say David O. McKay and they're just a soft spot in their heart. And this is the house where he was raised. His family still owns it. They open it up for tours sometimes during the summer. And you can go up and visit it and get a glimpse of the childhood and what made this great prophet who he was.
How do people find out if there are tours on this?
There is a the family still owns the home, and you can call them. Their phone number is 801-944-8564.
To see if you can set up a
So
tour.
we
And
can
all of
yeah.
these are free, correct?
All of these are
All
free.
of these are free.
And you can find them just on the side of the road.
Well, great ideas to keep us busy for the summer. Emily, thank you so much for coming in.
Sure.
This will be fun. Yeah. Well, next week we'll share some hidden gems in the southern part of the state with Emily. And if you've got an interesting place worth visiting in the state, tell us about it on our Facebook page. And if you have some pictures, share those as well. We'll choose 2 people to win a pair of tickets to see the Nashville Tribute Band in concert on August 4th. And that will take place at the Sandy Amphitheater. This band, by the way, was recently featured at a special youth conference in Hong Kong, which we'll talk about later on in the show. To win, just go to our Mormon Times TV on Facebook and share your favorite hotspots. Coming up next, Made to Run. It's a friendship that goes the distance. Hear about the life lessons learned along the way. And what's Jimmer up to now, making his voice heard in the California community? We'll have more on Jimmer coming up.
I can only imagine.
It's one of the most inspirational stories you will ever see. Dick Hoyt has pulled, pushed, and carried his handicapped son Rick through dozens of triathlons. Well, we found a similar story in Ogden, the ultimate tale of brotherly love. Bart Kendrick has never run a race on his own.
Okay,
In fact, the Ogden native can't walk on his own.
there we go.
But thanks to ward member Manuel Cyphers,
Let's put your helmet on, Bart.
Kendrick has finished 3 marathons and 6 half marathons,
We strap his knees in.
all in the modified wheelchair they affectionately call the Bartmobile.
Here we go, Bart. Ready for another day? Yeah! This is the best way we can inspire people and touch people's lives, more people than we can any other way.
They begin each run with a prayer.
Amen.
Then it's time to hit the road and get in another training run for their upcoming race.
It's truly a privilege for me to be able to do this, and I'm honored by it because Bart's spirit excites and inspires so many people.
Bart was born with trisomy 8, a congenital defect where there's an extra chromosome. Though he's 48 years old, he communicates on the level of a young boy.
It's been good for Bart. He looks forward to it very, very much and Manuel's faithful. They do it almost, unless it's bad weather, they do it almost once a week just to practice.
What does it mean to you then to run these races? How does it make you feel inside?
Good.
Manuel weighs 190 pounds, but pushes 215 pounds when you add Bart and his Bartmobile. Running uphill is hard.
It's too heavy, what I carry.
But when Manuel's legs feel heavy, he remembers the scripture that dawns their racer, the verse they adopted as their theme.
It's 2 Timothy 4:7. Paul wrote this just before his martyrdom, and he wrote, I've fought a good fight, I've run my course, I've kept the faith. And that describes Bart's life. He's kept the faith and he's fought a good fight, that's for sure.
And I'm weary.
Manuel has been part of that good fight, pushing Bart over hundreds of miles. But ironically, they don't finish the race together. Manuel stops 50 feet from the finish line, and with the aid of his walker, Bart finishes the race on his own.
And to me, there's a message there. We can't cross the finish line on our own. We need help. And I can get him so far, but he has to get himself the rest of the way.
There's a light at the end of this endless road, filled with love strong enough to lift any
Manuel and Bart's last race was in the Days of 47 10K, and they're hoping to get into the St. George Marathon coming up in October. Well, coming up next, the church in China, an inside look at a memorable youth conference held there in Hong Kong. The Nashville Tribute Band put on a show these kids will long remember. And the arts thrive in Gunnison thanks to the conversion of a talented family over a half a century ago. See how their ancestors are giving back to a community who cared. There are over 1.3 billion people living in China today. Very few of them are LDS. Though the members are few, their faith is strong. Each year, the young men and women of the church gather for youth conference. This year, they had a nice surprise when the Nashville Tribute Band traveled there to perform.
You know, for a bunch of guys in Nashville, it's interesting enough to get a phone call to go to China, and it's a long ways away. But we made the long trip, and we were excited to do it. We got a call from a guy named John Ford, and John and Stephanie Ford live in Beijing, and he and his wife's church calling was over this youth conference, this annual youth conference in Hong Kong, and they asked us to come over. You know, we spent the last 5 or 6 years traveling around the world sharing this show, but never expected to go to China. Growing up in Oklahoma, I wasn't around a whole lot of members of the church. But this is a whole different kind of few people, you know. Living in a city of 12 million people and being the only LDS youth in that city, that's a brand new kind of brave that I've never experienced before. The ones we spent the time with and that were at this youth conference in particular were kids whose parents work inside the Republic of China at various jobs, and they were from all over the world. It really felt like that they had 300,000 more miles than the average youth that I've been around in my life, and we were shocked to find out and so surprised, pleasantly surprised, that they were probably the strongest group of kids we've ever been around. And I'll never forget the youth as they taught us, "I am a child of God" in Chinese. We were blessed to be able to give a concert for them while we were there, and to be able to share our testimonies of the prophet Joseph Smith, of the Restoration, and to honor the heritage of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. You know, we went up on the mountain in shirts and ties, and it was a warm Sunday day, but what a great way to spend the Sabbath up there, where the country of China was dedicated for the missionary work. The gospel will be preached to every nation, kindred, tongue, and people, and we got to see that prophecy come true in the faces and the lives of these youth. We expected to go to China to play some music and to lift them, but we walked away with all the good stuff, and that was a testimony of each of these great kids.
You can check out the award-winning group Nashville Tribute Band in concert on August 4th at the Sandy Amphitheater. They'll be releasing their new CD, The Work, a Nashville tribute to the missionaries. For more information about the concert, go to smithtix.com. For a chance to win tickets, go to our Facebook page at Mormon Times TV and tell us about one of your favorite historical hotspots in Utah, and we'll choose 2 people to win a pair of tickets to their show. The King James Bible is 400 years old this year. It was first published in 1611. To celebrate its anniversary, a first edition copy is on display at the David O. McKay Library at BYU, Idaho. The exhibit runs through December and is open to the public from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., Monday through Friday. Former BYU basketball star Jimmer Fredette was the 10th pick in June's NBA draft and will play for the Sacramento Kings. Fredette was featured recently in the Sacramento Bee newspaper. They reported that Jimmer met with a group of LDS business leaders and BYU alumni at the team's arena shortly after the draft. He said he plans on speaking to youth at firesides and attending a ward in Sacramento. But of course, first there needs to be a season. Right now, NBA owners and players are trying to agree on a new collective bargaining agreement. For one family, the atrocities of World War II set in motion their conversion to the gospel.
We understand that we're being blessed and we want to give back.
In gratitude for their blessings, this talented group holds an annual arts camp in Gunnison. We'll have more on that story coming up. But first, it's time to highlight some of our missionaries serving in the field. If you want us to feature a missionary you know, please send us a picture to mormontimes@ksl.com. A family of Japanese descent is preparing to remember its roots, which began at an internment camp during World War II. It was the first step in finding the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Sam Penrod reports on how the family is repaying the kindness given decades before.
E, D, C.
School may be out, but these students are here to learn about the arts. At the Inouye Arts Institute, a week-long camp in Gunnison, children of all ages get a wide range of opportunities involving creative writing, visual art, and music. But the roots of this story go back to World War II. Charles and Bessie Inouye, both American-born but of Japanese descent, were sent to an internment camp in Wyoming during World War II.
My father firmly believed that we were led through the experiences that we had to our faith and to the truth of the gospel.
Bessie's sister Rose, now 91, remembers the 4 years at Heart Mountain, Wyoming.
We were negative about a lot of things. Why? And the living conditions.
At the end of the war, with just $25 and a train ticket, Charles and Bessie began a new life working on a farm near Gunnison. Neighbors took their young children to church. Charles and Bessie were not interested in joining the faith, but allowed their children to be baptized. Things changed 25 years later, in 1974, when Elizabeth Ann, who was at college, received a Christmas card from her parents.
In that card, it said, by the way, if you're available to come down on the 26th, we're going to be baptized. And that's how I found out that my parents were going to be baptized.
All of Charles and Bessie's children and grandchildren went on to serve missions. The grandchildren continue to give back to the community that received their grandparents. Each summer, they return to Gunnison to sponsor the nonprofit arts camp.
The music and the dance and the art, it's sort of the medium in which we teach them how to, reach deep in themselves and develop some kind of that confidence and that resourcefulness and that creativity that my grandparents had to find also to meet new challenges.
A pathway that began with difficult times during World War II that ultimately led Charles and Bessie Inouye to find their faith.
That route that our parents were led on brought us to the gospel of Jesus Christ and the truth of the gospel. It's been a huge blessing to not only to us, but it will be a blessing to all of our posterity.
A family legacy that continues to yet another generation. Sam Penrod for Mormon Times.
In 3 weeks, the extended Inouye family will travel to the dedication of the Heart Mountain Interpretive Learning Center in Wyoming. Elizabeth Ann Takasaki was recently called to serve on the Young Women's General Board.
To set a good example for my brothers and sisters.
I really want to make something out of myself and be able to have an education beyond high school.
The students I've seen just excel.
Soar to success. That's the goal of hundreds of multicultural students with their eyes set on higher education. Brooke Walker shows us how BYU is helping them celebrate their heritage and focus on the future.
They come from all over. Each one looking to soar. Every summer, 300 high school students attend Brigham Young University for special week-long camps called SOAR.
SOAR is an academic program. It stands for Summer of Academic Refinement. It's for multicultural students, which doesn't necessarily mean ethnically multicultural.
It's a summer program for students who are going into their senior year of high school, who maybe have lacked some of the educational support systems in their lives.
I am like the first person in my family to attend to college.
My parents don't work, and I want to be independent, and I want to work and make something of myself.
During SOAR sessions, students prepare for the ACT and then take the college entrance exam. BYU officials also share useful information.
It's almost secrets about how to kind of get into college and how to be successful.
The best possible thing they could ever do in their lives to prepare for family and for jobs and for life in general is to get an education.
But SOAR does a lot more than just push academics. The students learn how to conquer fears. They tour Temple Square and have nightly devotionals aimed at helping the students strengthen their testimonies.
They can combine your culture and your education and the gospel into your life, and it's a really great blessing for all of us who have this opportunity.
But perhaps the biggest lesson?
We're trying to help them to understand their heritage. And each of us comes from a heritage, regardless of whether it's a Polynesian or a Latino or Latina or African or anything like that. We all come from a heritage. And it's important that we find out what that heritage is. That plays a role in who we are.
The biggest lesson I've learned is to be proud about who you are, no matter what. Even though sometimes you don't feel accepted, there's many people who have open arms.
They expect you for who you are, and they want you to be yourself.
For Mormon Times, I'm Brooke Walker.
This year, 500 students applied for SOAR and 300 were chosen. Last year, 180 students who participated in the event were accepted to BYU. Thanks so much for being with us this morning, and we hope you join us again next Sunday morning on Mormon Times.